Starting today, arrivals from China must take an extra PCR test before traveling to Korea. That's on top of the current mandatory test they have to take when they arrive here. South Korea is warning that the 2018 inter-Korean military agreement could come to an end if the North continues to push ahead with its provocations. And more than 200,000 people visit the Vatican to pay homage to the late Pope Benedict XVI. The funeral mass is set to take place on Thursday. It's the first time in the modern age that a current pope will eulogize a retired one. Good morning and welcome to a new day at Arirang. Starting today, travelers from China must submit a negative COVID test before entry into South Korea. Now, this comes as more and more travelers from the country have tested positive upon arrival. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
Starting Thursday, all travelers arriving from China will be required to submit a negative test result before entering South Korea. This means Koreans and foreigners boarding flights from China must undergo a PCR test within 48 hours or a rapid antigen test by a medical expert within 24 hours of boarding. However, travelers attending a funeral, on trips for diplomatic purposes, infants and toddlers under the age of 6, and those who have been infected and treated for COVID-19 within 40 days are exempt from the measure. The latest move comes as South Korea is seeing a soaring number of travelers from China testing positive for COVID-19. For instance, figures as of midnight Wednesday show that 131 out of 172 travelers tested positive, meaning a 76% positivity rate. Meanwhile, police said Wednesday that a 41-year-old Chinese national had escaped a government-designated quarantine facility for foreigners after testing positive for COVID-19 upon entering South Korea. The whereabouts of the man is still unknown. The KDCA said the man has been placed in the wanted list for the violation of the Infectious Disease Control and Prevention Act, where under the law, he could face imprisonment of at least 1 year or a fine of over $7,800 as well as deportation. In the meantime, the World Health Organization said Wednesday that China's COVID-19 data is not giving an accurate picture of the situation there and underrepresents the number of hospitalization and deaths from the disease. The remarks come as the WHO prepares to meet with Chinese scientists again on Thursday as part of a wider briefing among member states on the global COVID-19 situation. Earlier, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus reiterated that the agency is concerned about the surge in COVID-19 infections in China and urged Beijing to deliver rapid and regular data on hospitalization and deaths there. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Following recent drone intrusion by North Korea, South Korea's commander-in-chief says any more of these trespasses could make the inter-Korean military agreement on halt. The South is also speeding up to establish a drone unit. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is warning North Korea that its behavior is putting the 2018 inter-Korean military agreement at risk.
President Yoon was briefed on Wednesday by the National Security Office, the Defense Ministry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Defense Development Agency on our drone defense strategy. He ordered officials to review suspending the September 19th inter-Korean military agreement if North Korea carries out provocations involving incursion into our territory.
The 2018 inter-Korean military agreement refers to an agreement signed by former President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un back in 2018, which prohibits the two Koreas from flying around and carrying out on-land military exercises, including artillery firing around the military demarcation line, while also putting buffer zones along their sea borders, in order to prevent direct confrontations. However, North Korea has violated the terms of the agreement several times, most recently flying drones into the South Korean territory as far as into the northern side of the capital. That said, on top of his statement, President Yoon also issued 4 directives to the defense minister. 1. To create a drone unit that can both carry out reconnaissance as well as combat. 2. To mass-produce small drones that are hard to detect within this year. 3. To develop stealth drones. And lastly, to quickly come up with an anti-drone system. An official at the Defense Ministry expressed confidence that all the orders do seem possible to carry out. This includes creating a new multi-purpose drone unit. The official said that while creating a new unit requires the ministry to review a number of items, including the new unit's scope of operation, chain of command, as well as resources, the process will be expedited as much as possible. However, there was no specific timeline given. As for developing a stealth drone within this year, according to the official, the Defense Development Agency has already been doing research into stealth drones, and by pushing things faster, such drone will be developed by the end of the year. South Korea has already had a drone unit since 2018, but the unit had much smaller scope of operation with not much on-field exercise and experience, according to the official. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden will hold talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the White House next Friday. Topics will include ways to bolster military cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. National Security spokesperson John Kirby on Wednesday hinted at more military exercises between the two countries amid a recent North Korean provocation. Kirby said the U.S. and Japan military cooperation is already quite extraordinary, and that the Biden administration will continue to improve trilateral cooperation with South Korea as well. America's new Congress is still unable to move forward with the business, with the White House Speaker vote now into its second day. This comes as a Republican leader Kevin McCarthy on Wednesday again failed to gain support from factions inside his own party, even after a total of 6 rounds of votes. House Speaker leadership traditionally goes into the leader of the majority party, which in this new session is a GOP. The House is currently adjourned until 8 p.m. local time, and local media is reporting that negotiations are underway among Republicans to resolve the internal fracture. This marks the first time in 100 years that a House Speaker was not named on the first day of a new Congress session. According to minutes from the U.S. Fed's December policy meeting released Wednesday, officials are committed to fighting inflation and expect higher interest rates to remain in place until more progress is being made. During the meeting, where policymakers raised their key interest rate by another 50 basis points, they expressed the importance of maintaining the policy, hinting that no rate cuts will happen in 2023. They said that similar measures will likely continue until inflation eases towards their target of 2%. Experts predict a 25 basis point increase in the next rate-setting meeting. The nation doubles down on its efforts to boost productivity and efficiency when it comes to agriculture and oceans and fisheries. This was the focal point of Wednesday's policy briefing to the president. Our Shin Se-byuk reports.
South Korea is going to ramp up its efforts to boost productivity in the agricultural and marine industries in parallel with the era of digitalization. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries presented their policy plans for the upcoming year to President Yoon. At the briefing, President Yoon stressed the importance of improving the productivity and efficiency of each industry, saying the two ministries are dealing with the important matters related to food.
지금은 이제 4차 산업혁명의 시대입니다. 그리고 디지털화가 점점 심화, 고도화되는 그런 상황입니다. 그래서 이런 산업자원부라든지 이런 중기벤처부뿐만이 아니라 농수산 또 해양 이런 것을 담당하는 부처에서도 담당하고 있는 산업이 더욱 디지털화되고 더욱 첨단화되고 또 더욱 그 혁신을 이뤄내서 생산성을 높이는 것이 매우 중요합니다.
To start with, the government has set the goal of achieving $10 billion in agricultural exports this year. To achieve that, and for the future of the South Korea's agriculture industry, it will promote smart farming as a future growth engine. Under the plan, the ministry will also work to turn 30% of all greenhouses and barns into the so-called smart facilities by 2027. Also, to nurture young farmers, it will build 3 new smart farms tailored to each region and 2 young farmer startups hubs equipped with smart farms and residences. The Oceans Ministry, meanwhile, unveiled its ambitious plan to create a marine leisure tourism belt in the country's southern coastal area. Under the plan, Busan and the provinces of Gyeongsang-namdo and Jeollanam-do will become major tourist destinations in Northeast Asia. Also, the ministry plans to build 5 of what it calls Korean Cancuns, a reference to the popular resort city in Mexico. Another plan rolled out is to build smart megaports in Busan and Jinhae. In Busan in particular, it plans to establish a smart logistics center. Detailed plans for a new port in Jinhae are due in June this year. 신세벽, Arirang News.
The minimum wage in South Korea has risen at the start of 2023, while the government is aiming to increase flexibility in the current 52-hour work week. Now, what changes will shake up the labor market this year? Our Lee Dae-yeon explains.
It's now the era of the 2 million won salary. The minimum hourly wage in 2023 has been set at 9,621. At the current exchange rate, it's approximately $7.50. That's up 5% or about 30 cents from last year. This is applied from the first day of this year. Converting this into a monthly payment, assuming someone works 209 hours a month, this would come to around 2.01 million won or $1,570. This was decided back in June by the Minimum Wage Commission, considering the needs of small businesses hit hard by the pandemic. Here's what some members of the public had to say on the wage increase.
The minimum wage is now almost 10,000 won, and I think it's a little too much. Convenience stores are run by owners these days because they need to pay part-time workers 2 million won a month if they hire them.
Considering rising consumer prices, I think the recent minimum wage increase is not enough. Think about the salaries that young people get. I'm hoping for the wage to rise even more.
Apart from the minimum wage, the Yoon administration is set to increase flexibility in the 52-hour work week. Earlier last month, the Future Labor Market Research Association advised that labor and management be allowed to manage overtime work hours on a monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, or even yearly basis in addition to the current weekly basis. The association also recommended allowing workers to freely set their work hours. But there's a rocky road ahead as a labor umbrella organization has opposed the new policy proposals. An expert says there should be additional measures to prevent overwork.
At least the government should set the maximum working days in a week. With flexible working hours, a worker might have to work even 7 days a week when there's too big a workload. To prevent this, there should be restrictions on the number of working days an employer can order an employee to work, like less than 5 days a week.
The government would have to consider additional measures for any possible excessive workload that may harm the health of workers, as controversy still remains about whether the new work system can be properly implemented. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
An Jung-guen is a Korean independence activist, mainly known for the assassination of Ito Hirobumi, who was the first prime minister of Japan. His story is now being remembered in a musical movie named Hero, released here in South Korea. For more, we've invited Kim Kyung-hyun, a professor of modern Korea at UC Irvine. Welcome, Professor.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
Thanks for joining us this morning. So
Sure.
now the movie, Now the movie has attracted audience of 100,000 on its opening day and over 1.8 million viewers since its release 2 weeks ago. Now, what makes this particular musical movie different or stand out from other movies?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Korea is a place where we love, I think Koreans love song and dance. It's a place where obviously you see 노래방, just about every street corner. However, I don't think there has been, in the history of Korean cinema, a musical film that has successfully performed as well as this particular movie. Obviously, it's being performed by Avatar, James Cameron movie, but at the same time, I think it's still a very, very well-made movie. It actually breaks out of this kind of notion or a stereotype that Korean musicals do not actually, they're awkward and they just don't make musicals well. So never before I feel as if you actually saw a musical film as successful and as, workable as The Hero.
Right, musical movies sound quite refreshing to me as well. Now, alongside the musical version, there's also what we might call a more regular adaptation of An Jung-guen story playing in cinemas, as it was its premiere was postponed due to the pandemic for 2 years. Now, can you tell us how similar or different are a musical movie and actual musical?
Well, the stage version, the original stage version that the movie has adapted from, is I think there are many minor changes, but I think in terms of the major change, there's probably two. The replacement of Korean songs by Ito Hirogumi, Japanese, obviously, prime minister who gets assassinated. His lyrics as well as dialogue has been replaced with Japanese, so to heighten the reality of the movie version. And then I think the restaurant owner, the dumpling restaurant owner in Harbin is replaced from originally the Chinese character to a Korean character. This probably reflects, the difficult kind of diplomatic, perhaps, relationship South Korea currently has over the last few years with China.
Sure. And one last question. There has been some reaction from Japan insisting that An is a terrorist who should not be praised for his actions. What's your thought on this? And how do you think K-content like Hero can play a role in correcting history?
Well, of course, he's a terrorist. I mean, judging from today's standard. But at the same time, then you have to question, right, the entire mechanism of the occupation of Japan at the time 100 years ago that was also based on terrorist strategy. I mean, I think the film makes 2 points, which is, listen, An Jung-gwen's act is retaliation against assassination of Quinn Min, which Ito Hirogumi was clearly deeply involved with. And that was itself a terrorist act. And Koreans need to, retaliate. And two, he ought to be seen as what? War martyr or POW, prisoner of war, who was caught in the act of military action rather than a criminal, in a civil case. So those are the kind of, I think the argument clearly makes, and I think it's an effective one.
All right. Thank you, Professor, for your insight this morning and afternoon for you. Happy New Year.
Thanks.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang News Center. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning to you.
All right, let's start with the latest on the funeral proceedings of former Pope Benedict XVI, as a 3-day wake has just come to an end.
Well, that's right. After tens of thousands of visitors journeyed to Vatican City from around the world to pay their respects, the wake came to a close on Wednesday evening local time at St. Peter's Basilica. Now, Pope Benedict XVI's body will now be put in a traditional cypress casket and taken into St. Peter's Square 45 minutes before the start of a funeral mass. for the recital of the Rosary. Now, Pope Francis will preside over the ceremony taking place on Thursday at 9:30 a.m. local time or 5:30 p.m. Korea time. The event marks the first time in the modern age that a current pope will eulogize a retired one. Pope Benedict, who stepped down in 2013, died in the Vatican monastery last Saturday at the age of 95. His body will be buried according to his wishes in the crypt under St. Peter's Basilica. Now, turning over to the U.S. now, where the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the sale of abortion pills at retail pharmacies, this to customers with a prescription. Previously, only certified healthcare providers were allowed to order, prescribe and dispense the medication. Pharmacies can now begin applying for certification to sell mifepristone, part of a 2-drug course that induces an abortion. The other drug was already approved for sale at retail pharmacies. Changes also allow patients to receive prescriptions through telehealth services and come just days after the U.S. Justice Department released an opinion that the U.S. Postal Service should be allowed to deliver abortion drugs. This latest move comes as a number of U.S. states look to implement abortion bans, following a Supreme Court ruling that access to abortion is not a constitutional right. Meanwhile, at Twitter, the social media platform has said it will ease its 3-year ban on political advertising. The company tweeted on Tuesday that expansions to the political ads it permits will be made in the coming weeks, whilst cause-based ads will be allowed sooner. Twitter had previously banned political ads in 2019 due to concerns over the spread of misinformation on social media. The latest change, implemented by new owner Elon Musk, is a move to drum up more revenue for the platform, as advertising is its main income source. Since Musk's takeover, a number of large advertisers paused their ad campaigns after the new CEO laid off thousands of employees and reinstated controversial accounts. And finally, the pilot from the first successful crewed space mission in NASA's Apollo program, Walter Cunningham, died on Tuesday local time in Houston at the age of 90. The retired astronaut was the last surviving member of the 3-man Apollo 7 mission. The mission in 1968 lasted 11 days and paved the way for the first man being put on the moon the next year. It was also the first space flight to broadcast live footage of Americans from space, which saw the astronauts win a special Emmy Award for their daily television reports. Now, before joining NASA in 1963, Cunningham served as a fighter pilot with the U.S. Marine Corps and flew 54 missions in Korea.
Good morning. Much awaited cold relief is in store this afternoon. The morning temperatures are as cold as yesterday in most parts of the country, with cold wave alerts remain in place for parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do province. But along with the rise in temperatures is that unwelcome guest again. Dust levels look high with nasty air blowing in from overseas. Ultrafine dust levels in most western regions and Jeju will be high, while the west of Gangwon-do province will see bad air at night. There will be sunny skies to begin the day, but parts of Jeollado province are covered with thick fog this morning. Then afternoon highs in Seoul will go up to 4 degrees Celsius, Daegu, Gyeongju topping out at 8 degrees, with dry weather alerts remain in place for East Coast regions. Now, afternoon highs will stay above norms through early next week, hovering around 5 degrees Celsius in the capital, with a mix of rain and snow in the forecast nationwide on Friday and Saturday. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.